Hey!
Hello.
All right, so what are you looking for, like based on what we worked with, what I talked about of like the ego and the survival programs, what are you looking for, like
So
help?
basically, I have always been curious what my attachment style was based on my childhood. I had a semi-traumatic childhood. My husband had none. Like his
Hmm.
parents are still married, they're still very functional. They don't really show public displays of affection,
Hmm.
but I had a neglectful parent who was on drugs, and I didn't realize it until I was older. So for me, I'm either fight or fawn based on what you
Hmm.
said. And
Right.
he is very avoidant.
Hmm.
He is.
Is that him? How dare
Well,
you? Give
this
us
is
some
the
love,
girls.
man. Come on, chicken, give us some love.
He will not, he will sweep everything under the rug, and it's very challenging for me just at this point to have any conversation where I can bring up my emotions where they get validated. So I'm curious, like, how can I as an anxious partner interact with him as an avoidant partner and still be
Right.
successful in our marriage? We've been together for 10 years. We have 2 kids, but it's just become
Wow.
more prevalent because I've started healing and I've started doing the inner work, and I've recently become a yoga instructor, and
Wow.
I'm trying to just heal.
Yeah.
And he's not really on board with that because he doesn't understand the trauma. So I'm
This is
stuck.
Yeah, this is honestly like probably the number one question I get in my work is like,
Really?
how do I fix my relationship? Yeah, it's give me a fucking answer. It's because what's interesting is in our schooling and our entire like social upbringing, no one has ever taught us about the relationship with ourselves, right? Which
Right?
if they had, like if you look at the Buddhist community, for example, I'm from India, so I like in the northeast of India, it's a huge Buddhist community. Their first focus is, am I treating myself well?
Yes.
And so, for them, yeah, exactly. And so, like, their schooling and everything tells them about it. So, as they grow into adults, that idea is I can't treat someone else if I don't treat myself well. It's just a basic premise. And so, in our schooling, it's the opposite, where we're raised thinking relationships are everything, marriage is everything. And for various reasons, religion and society did that to procreate and expand, like, the number of people within their own community. That's one of the strongest reasons why they did it, is because they were like, my community can expand if I just say, focus on childbearing, focus on childbearing. Your relationship is now what's important. Being a parent is now your new focus in life, all of that stuff, right? So your first question was, what is your attachment style? In my opinion, like just off the top of my head, knowing what I know from what you described already, I could tell you probably hands down that it would be that you feel you're the anxious attachment, which I think you already brought up. And it's good that you're aware about it. What's important is when we're aware, it's not something to be ashamed of. That's the magic. When we recognize where we're hurting, where we're like, where we're wounded or where we're lying on the ground, we're creating an opportunity of reality, and for us to say, okay, now I have to stand up.
Yes.
Whereas if I'm lying down on the ground, but I'm just imagining to myself that like I'm constantly flying, then I just never have to think to myself, okay, yeah, everything is fine. I don't really need to work through this. So first, I want to commend you on actually saying and recognizing that you have that, like, anxious style. Um, I will give you in a gist. So if you check out the last 3 posts that I put out on our Instagram, they all are based very similarly on this topic. However, I will give you, since you're here with me, the basis or the basic premise that I give almost everybody.
Okay.
And this is the truth that I believe and that I teach people, and I teach people in all my programs, which is the fact that you have to focus on healing yourself first. Now, yeah, I know that's not the answer you want, because of course we all want our partners to be healed before we can, right? I mean, that's also easier. It's so much easier. It helps because then we can just sit back and be like, well, he's healed, so this is good.
Or at
But
the
I'm
same time, it's so hard to get the synchrony.
yeah, no, it is, and you're absolutely right. But here's the thing: a lot of the time, we want them to heal first with us, right? Because then it makes it easier for us, and it's like this moment to say, oh yeah, we are actually healing together as a couple. But the biggest thing is that's not in your control. And in fact, when you try to impose it, when you try to control it in some way, it has the opposite effect. Am I right?
Yes.
where they start to feel even more distant, and they're like, leave me the fuck alone. Like, give me my space, leave me alone. Like, you can't force it down my throat. And, to make Misty feel more comfortable in the situation, I want everybody who's on this call and listening, if you've been through a situation like that, just throw it in the chat and say, yes, I've been in something similar. I know what you're talking about. I feel that same pain, because it's relevant for all of us. So if you try to push healing down his throat in your time frame, in your method of understanding or space, or even your desire or time of growth, he will resent you for it.
Right.
And so not only will the relationship possibly end, but two things: until it ends, he will resent you and kind of hate you, and after it ends, he might still hate you, because
so
he
my
will blame you
issue
for
is
everything.
I feel like he's being resentful because I'm healing. He's mentioned that I'm not the same person when we got married 10 years ago, which I'm not.
Absolutely.
I've had
Absolutely.
a trauma. I've had all of these other things happen. My mother was murdered. Trauma, huge trigger 5 years ago, trying to heal from that. I didn't impose that on him. I didn't want that to happen, but nonetheless, we're where we're at now.
Yeah. So Missy, that's why, as a continuation of what I was saying, there's always predominantly only two outcomes. And I'm just telling you this on a broad perspective because, obviously we don't have time for me to take you through the individual perspectives. Option one, or perspective one, or choice one, is where you focus on yourself so much to say, instead of pushing him, I will lead him. Which means that instead of me begging, pushing, pleading, and fighting with him, so you probably, inner work is not a fawning conversation with you and him. I'll bet it's a fighting conversation, isn't it? There you go. So and you recognize in that moment that your ego wants him to do it so badly so you can feel better for yourself, obviously what you've gone through, that you want to wrestle with him. I'm sorry. Also, I have to tell you, not many people like me because I always call out the truth of what I see. So I completely get
it's so good. Call me out on my BS.
No, it's because, again, it comes back to the same point of saying, okay, then what can I work with? What can I do? So let's come back to that statement, right? You have to lead him by you being the person to inspire him to heal. Now, you cannot inspire him to heal if you're fighting with him to heal, because that's not inspiring. So any real leader, no, it's true, any real leader cannot get us to do what they want with love if they're choking our necks and saying, I know this is good for you, do it. That's what we tend to do as parents, and that's how our kids tend to resent us, right?
Yes,
so
you're going to make me cry. That's so good.
I don't... You have to be the example for him to want to heal, Misty. Otherwise, he's not going to want to heal. I cannot give you a more honest truth than that. If you want, my mom was a psychologist and a marriage counselor, and we studied her cases together, and she taught me and I worked with her, and I actually saw the truth for what it is. That in a marriage, many cases, almost all cases, if you work on only the communication and the issue of the present, you're just going to be just like putting on a Band-Aid on. You're going to be like, well, how do you wish you spoke to her? How does she wish she spoke to you? You do this, but when you go back home and you're in your own environment and safe, then the truth comes out all over again. So it's just like you're going back and forth and back and forth. But if you go back and you heal that wound, you show up really differently to him. And I swear to you, right now, he's seen you as being a very different person, but you're still in that stage where you're like, I'm a different person, but I want you to be this person too. And so this is not yet at that stage of growth. What happens as you grow more is you start to recognize and you say, I'm a different person, but I understand that maybe you're not capable of being the person that I am. And that's okay. I will allow you the time, the space, because we've committed to this. We've wanted to move forward with this. I will allow you to heal in this. But I will tell you one thing. I can't go back. I'm sorry. I love myself way too much now to go back. And so now what happens? This is where option two potentially comes in. If your husband is not inspired by you to say, holy fuck, Misty has changed so much. I have seen this happen countless times where it's predominantly the husband in most cases because of the association of avoidancy that men get because they're shamed for emotions when they're kids, that they don't want to do any inner work or blah, blah, blah. And so at that point, they're like, holy shit, my wife is she's grown so much. She's looking so attractive. Everybody wants to be around her, wants to be a part of her. The kids are really loving being around her. I want to grow the fuck up in my emotional space just so I can be with her because it's amazing. Now, in that space, there's a massive possibility of that actually happening. where that person starts to recognize through your healing that they need to heal, but not by you asking and pushing them to heal. That's not how it happens. Now, if the second thing is, what if they're not capable to do that? What if they're not ready to do that? What if it's not their timeline to do that?
If it's not their timeline.
Exactly. Then that again, and this again, Missy, this is the beauty of how we live on the entire universe through ourselves, is that's another avenue for your growth, where you have to recognize, what do I do in my life right now? Do I stay with this individual because I feel like, okay, we have kids that we raised, because we've committed to this much time so far, because I've been with him for this much space and time in my life? Do I just stick with it, but have a possibility of constantly resenting him throughout for not being the man I want him to be, and resenting myself for being stuck in this situation and not having the freedom of who I can be, right?
Or setting a healthy boundary for myself and saying, this is self-love, I need to be able to grow.
Yeah, and which leads to the second point of saying, you know what, you're a great man, you're amazing, and you still are an amazing person. Where we were when we first met is what we needed from each other. We needed it for various reasons, to either create a family, to grow, to whatever. But where we are right now, maybe we're too different and have evolved differently for each other. And if he cannot step into the growth, whether because he's not ready, because he hasn't discovered his own wounds, because he hasn't, like he's not inspired enough, any of those things, then you have to really make an authentic choice for yourself. Right. And what you want to do for your children as well. Because this, believe it or not, is another way we pass on generational trauma.
And I don't want to pass on another trauma to my kids. I want to end the generational curse.
Exactly. And so, you know, a lot of people think, this is what's so funny about like how society and psychology work together, right? Is that a lot of the time we think, oh my God, if I get divorced, it's going to be so traumatic for my child. You know what the child sees throughout constantly? Parents fighting, mom and dad either not sleeping in the same room or sleeping in the same room and yelling, not touching each other, no sign of affection, no sign of like safety in the house. You know what happens to the child? This becomes their idea of what a relationship should be like. This becomes their idea of what a life should be like. Exactly. And I'm not
in the same bed.
Yeah. And you know, that's the difficult thing.
I don't want my kids to think that's normal.
Yeah. I want to tell you, you talked about your husband's life, right? And you said like his parents are still together, all of that. I want to tell you, the way the world looks on the outside sometimes is not the way it actually is on the inside. He may actually have been very traumatized emotionally by his parents. And I can imagine that maybe his parents don't really love each other. That maybe they're just with each other because they had to be. And his idea, therefore, of love is what his dad's told him, which is just shut your mouth and commit to this. Go to work, do your stuff, come back.
That's what I've told him, I feel like.
Yeah. And my parents have been together now for like 46 years. They should have split up 20-something years ago. Honestly. No, it's the truth. Everybody in my family knows it. Even they know it. But at this point, they're both like in their late 70s. They're like, well, fuck it. We're so institutionalized. But they're so smart. Yeah, no, but at this point, they've realized, okay, if we're so used to the way we set up life together, let's live in a way that suits each of us. So one parent travels for 6 months of the years while my other parent's at home. And then when this one comes back, the other one goes. So it's like, it works for everybody. No one really cares. The kids are like, you know what, as long as you're happier, we see the happiness. But when we were kids, I recognized so strongly how we were exposed to the sarcasm from my mom and like the evasiveness from my dad, like not feeling like the emotional connection, that we as kids were like, man, are we causing this, like this trauma? Are we causing that pain with them?
No, I don't want my kids to have that.
And you know what? I can tell you, Misty, that your kids already, with you even having this conversation, they're blessed. Truthfully, I'm not even lying. You've got lucky kids, really, because they have a mom who's even talking about this, who's even wanted to venture. There's so many men and women who don't even feel safe to say, is there a possibility that I might have to leave my marriage? They don't even think that, because they're like, you know, no way. Like my parents will shame me for it. My siblings will be like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Society will be like, you're such a failure because your marriage is a failure, you know? So, and all of those things bring out this fear in us to need to stick with something that's not serving us. But this is where, in this case, very strongly, the inner child constantly gets suppressed, and the ego just keeps becoming bigger and bigger. And how the ego becomes bigger is, as I said to you, it creates a justification for resentment, where soon we can say, My husband he's an asshole. He's not willing to do the work. He's not willing to do anything. I'm willing to do all of that. I'm not saying this is you, but as you go forward, it becomes easier to do that.
Right.
Because we haven't made the authentic or the hard decision to say, if this is not truly serving me in the situation, I need to step out of here.
Right.
So, that's something that we have to honestly, take upon ourselves and say for ourselves, like, what is the best I can do for me?
Yes. It's like, what can I do? What is the best I can do right now? And this is the best I can do right now. I appreciate your advice and your guidance so much. Thank you.
Misty, something amazing I want to tell you about what you just said about my advice and my guidance. We seek in other people what already lives within us. This is actually the truth. No, I'm not lying to you. What I tell people is, I'm not like the best psychologist, coach, like, psychoanalyst or anything. I'm just one of the best mirrors. I'm someone who can sit here, take your story and reflect it back to you in a way that you can actually understand it. That's it. But that's what really gets to you, because at that point you're like, wow, this makes sense because I want it to make sense. You see?
Thank you.
That
makes sense. It does.
I know you're in a really challenging and difficult place right now. I know where you are is really hard. And, you can buy my forceful talking and my stuff of saying, this is what you should do. And this is what I'm also divorced, by the way, just to let you know. I have been divorced. And it was one of the best things that ever happened to me in my life, which is why I really understand relationships now. And I really understand what they're about and how I can talk about relationships and advice on relationships. But what I have to tell you is, I can't imagine what it's like having kids and having to make that decision. Mm-hmm. But I can swear one thing to you, Misty, in writing in my blood. Whatever decision you make, your children will learn from. So if you make a decision for yourself, even though the entire world shames you, your children will look at them and look at their mom and be like, holy shit, we have one of the bravest women we ever could have as a role model in who we should be.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm doing a live chat. Who's here? We have company.
Is your kids? Your kids?
I have to go. Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks for jumping on. And I'm sending you so much love. I'm sending you so much love, Misty. For whatever decision that you make, I'm sending you a lot of love, comfort, and support.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Have a good day. Bye, Misty. Bye.